All right, let's dive into this, huh? Guerrilla warfare. Right.
Yeah.
You've given me a ton of stuff here. Notes. I see some in different languages, even
Oh.
excerpts from Che Guevara's book, and a critical analysis, too. Looks like you really want to go deep on this one.
It's a fascinating topic, that's for sure.
I'm excited to see where this goes. So what's
Yeah.
the plan for today?
Well, I was thinking we could start with the basics.
Okay.
You know, what IS guerrilla warfare?
Yeah.
How's it different from traditional warfare? And then we can look at Che Guevara.
Okay.
His life, his ideas.
So kind of like a three-pronged attack.
Yeah, three-pronged approach.
Okay, love it. So guerrilla warfare, right? What are we really talking about here? Your notes, I even see some Dutch mixed in here.
Oh, yeah, a little bit.
But what makes it different, this guerrilla warfare?
It's like the opposite of traditional warfare.
Okay.
You know, instead of big armies, you
Right.
have small groups
Ah.
fighting against a much larger force.
So like David and Goliath?
Exactly. David versus Goliath, but with strategy.
Okay, so it's not just about being small. It's about being strategic.
Absolutely. Strategy is key.
Okay, and I see here you also mention popular support, mobility, surprise, and knowledge of the terrain.
Right. Think about it.
Right.
A small group of fighters, outnumbered, outgunned,
Right.
they need the support of the local people.
For food, shelter, information.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a powerful
It is.
concept. It really makes you think, what does it take to earn that kind of trust?
Yeah.
How do those relationships work?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
We'll definitely come back to that
Okay.
when we talk more about Che Guevara.
Okay.
But for now, what stands out to you
Hmm.
about this definition of guerrilla warfare?
You know, I think what really fascinates me is this emphasis on strategy over just brute force.
Right.
It's not about being the strongest. It's about being the smartest.
Exactly.
It's like a chess game, but with incredibly high stakes.
And you have to remember, these are often groups fighting for freedom
Right.
against oppression.
Right.
So they have to be strategic
To survive.
to survive. So let's talk about the man who, well, practically wrote the book on this, Che Guevara. To really get him, we have to understand his story. And you brought this
Yeah.
biography.
A fascinating one.
Yeah, let's go back to his childhood. Set the scene for us.
Well, he was born in Argentina
Okay.
to a middle-class family, a
Yeah.
politically active family.
Interesting. So he wasn't poor or anything. It was more
No.
about exposure to ideas.
Yes, exposure to ideas.
To social inequalities.
Exactly.
Oh.
And they had a big library.
Oh, really?
And Che, partly because of his asthma,
Oh, right. And
became a big reader,
Yeah.
especially of Marx, Engels, all of the socialist thinkers.
so those early ideas about social justice combined with seeing the problems in the world.
It must have lit a fire in him.
Yes.
Revolutionary fire.
And you mentioned his asthma. Was that a big part of his life?
It was
Okay.
not just physically.
It shaped his personality.
Really? How so?
It made him love reading,
Okay.
but also it gave him this
Well,
disdain for weakness.
interesting. Almost like
Yeah.
a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Overcoming limitations,
Yeah.
fighting for something bigger.
Exactly.
Okay, so we had Xi growing up in this politically charged world, reading all these books,
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with his own physical challenges. Then he goes on these travels across Latin America.
Right. That's where it all came together for him.
Okay.
The ideas from the books
Yeah.
and the reality of the world.
Wow.
He saw poverty, exploitation.
It must have been eye-opening,
It was.
especially for someone already thinking about these issues.
It solidified his commitment
To what?
to action,
For revolution.
to revolution.
And that brings us to his book on guerrilla warfare.
the handbook.
Yes, like we're about to open a revolutionary's playbook.
Exactly. And remember,
Yes.
this was written in 1961, right after the Cuban Revolution.
So it's not just theory.
No.
It's based on experience.
On experience.
That's what makes it so fascinating.
Mm.
So tell us, what are the main points of Che Guevara's approach to guerrilla warfare?
One of the most important things for him,
Gosh.
that was popular support.
Oh,
He makes a big distinction
between
guerrilla warfare,
Okay.
which is a war of the people, and banditry.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about fighting.
No.
It's about aligning with the people.
Exactly. The guerrilla fighter
Yeah.
represents the will of the people.
Okay, that makes sense, given how important local communities are
Right.
to providing support and all that. He also talks a lot about strategy,
Oh, absolutely.
avoiding battles you can't win, hit-and-run tactics, ambushes.
He said the guerrilla soldier must never forget that it is the enemy that must serve as his source of supply of ammunition and arms.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. It's like using the enemy's strength against them.
Exactly.
I also see here that he emphasizes the importance of terrain, especially mountains.
Mountains are natural fortresses. They provide cover, mobility,
Okay.
a base of operations.
Makes sense. Your notes also mention a distinction he makes between sabotage and terrorism.
Yeah, that was important to him.
Okay.
He believed sabotage was a valuable tactic, but terrorism was ineffective and indiscriminate.
So he had a strong moral compass.
He did.
Even in war.
Even in war.
So we see that for Che Guevara. Popular support is key. Strategy is essential. The terrain is a weapon. And there are clear ethical lines. But he doesn't stop there. He actually outlines different phases of guerrilla warfare. It's like a roadmap, right?
A roadmap for revolution.
Exactly. So tell us, how does he see this progression from those small mobile units to ultimate victory?
He breaks it down into 4 phases.
Okay.
The first phase is all about survival. Small units, staying hidden, gathering support, harassing the enemy.
Like testing the waters.
Exactly. Then in the second phase,
Yeah.
things start to change.
Yeah. So
The guerrilla force grows stronger. They expand their territory, establish a more secure base,
right.
and they launch bigger attacks.
So it's less about surviving and more about strategic expansion.
Precisely.
Interesting.
And this leads to the third phase.
Okay.
This is a turning point.
Okay.
The separate guerrilla columns start to come together
Okay.
into a larger force.
Wow.
Now they can transition to more conventional warfare.
So the fighting changes
It does.
from hit and run
Yeah.
to holding territory to bigger battles.
Right.
And finally,
The fourth phase.
the final phase.
The culmination of the struggle.
Tell us.
The old regime is overthrown.
Okay.
The new government takes power. And those guerrilla tactics are now used for national defense.
Wow. It's like they come full circle.
Exactly.
From those small bands hiding in the shadows to the defenders of a new order.
Exactly.
But does it always work out this way?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Does reality follow this neat little roadmap?
Are there variations? Challenges?
Lots of them.
Yeah.
And that leads us perfectly
To
the Cuban Revolution.
where Che's theories were put to the test.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's a good framework, but
Right.
things are never that simple in real life, right?
No, of course not. There are always so many factors at play. The situation, the enemy, the people, the geography. It's like having a plan, but having to adapt constantly.
Exactly.
But to see how Che's ideas worked in practice, let's look at the Cuban Revolution.
A pivotal moment.
Yeah, I'm really curious to dive into this one.
It's where his theories were really put to the test.
So remind me, what was Cuba like in the 1950s, before the revolution?
Well, you had Fulgencio Batista in power,
Right.
a dictator,
Yeah.
corrupt, brutal, and close to the U.S.
Okay, so not a good situation.
Not at all.
And that's where Fidel Castro and Che Guevara saw an opportunity
To overthrow Batista.
to start a revolution.
To create a new Cuba.
And those mountains, the Sierra Maestra, that's where Che's skills really shone.
The perfect terrain for guerrilla warfare.
Using the mountains to their advantage.
Exactly.
Ambushing Batista's forces.
And gaining support from the locals.
It's like those principles we talked about. In action.
It is, isn't it?
Harnessing the power of the terrain. Turning the enemy's resources against them. Building those relationships with the people.
And as the revolution grew, those separate guerrilla groups started to come together.
To a larger force.
And eventually, they marched on Havana.
Wow.
And Batista's regime fell.
It's amazing how they did it.
A small group of revolutionaries.
With limited resources.
But with a powerful strategy.
And Che's ideas guiding them.
But for Che, the Cuban Revolution was more than just a victory.
What do you mean?
He saw it as a blueprint.
A blueprint for what?
For other revolutions.
Across Latin America.
And
that global vision, that international solidarity.
It was central to his thinking.
Okay, so we've talked about Che's philosophy. And we've seen how it played out in Cuba. But let's zoom in on the people involved. Your notes mention specific characters in Che's vision of guerrilla warfare.
Yes, he outlines these archetypes.
Archetypes. Okay, tell me more.
First, you have the guerrilla fighter.
So what makes a good guerrilla fighter, according to Che?
It's not just about being a good soldier. It's about dedication,
Okay.
discipline, a blend of courage and cunning.
So it's a mental thing, too.
It is.
It's about the mind
The mindset.
and the ideology.
Exactly.
He even uses the word ascetic,
Yes.
someone who embraces simplicity. Hardship.
For the cause.
It's like a calling.
In a way, it is.
It's more than just a job. It's a way of life.
And that commitment,
Yeah.
that willingness to sacrifice, it gives the guerrilla fighter their strength,
Their moral authority.
their power.
But isn't there a danger there, that level of commitment?
There is.
It could be a slippery slope
It can
from dedication,
to
fanaticism.
where the ends justify the means.
Right, and that's something to be careful of.
It is.
Okay, who's next in this cast of characters?
The peasant,
The peasant.
a vital ally.
Providing support.
Food, shelter, information.
A base of operations.
Exactly.
True partnership.
She believed in winning their trust,
Their cooperation.
making them part of the struggle.
And then there's the enemy,
The oppressive regime,
often backed by external forces,
like the U.S.
which Chi saw as a major problem.
A global force of imperialism.
It adds another dimension to the conflict.
It does.
Local struggles, connected to global power dynamics.
It's a complex web.
And finally, the population at large,
The people.
whose support is so important.
It's not just about military victories.
It's about winning hearts and minds.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how all these characters interact.
They do.
Which one stands out to you the most?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's the dynamic between the guerrilla fighter and the peasant.
Interesting. Why?
It's a partnership born out of necessity,
Right.
but it can become something more.
Something deeper.
It embodies Chi's vision of social change,
Where everyone is involved.
where the lines blur.
A collective struggle.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've looked at Chi's ideas in detail, but the big question is, how relevant are they today?
That's the question, isn't it?
Your critical analysis shed some light on that.
It does.
Why do you think Chi's work still resonates with people?
Well, even though it was written a while ago, his book offers a really valuable framework
For what?
for understanding asymmetric warfare,
Asymmetric warfare, meaning...
where one side has way more resources.
Okay, like in those guerrilla conflicts.
Yeah.
He described.
Exactly.
So even though warfare has changed, those core principles of using strategy to overcome a stronger enemy, they're still relevant.
Absolutely.
What about his emphasis on popular support, on ideological unity,
That's still relevant.
discipline, the will to win?
Crucial in any fight against a powerful opponent.
It's like a guidebook
In a way, it is.
for challenging the status quo,
For fighting for what you believe in.
even when the odds are stacked against you.
Exactly.
And his analysis of Cuba, of Latin America,
it shows us the complexities,
of these struggles,
the power dynamics.
the global forces at play.
It's never simple.
But of course, Chi's ideas aren't without their critics.
Of course not.
Every ideology has its limitations, its potential downsides.
What are some of those criticisms?
Well, some say his focus on armed struggle ignores the possibility of peaceful change.
Right.
Others worry about the potential for violence,
To escalate.
to spiral out of control.
A valid concern.
And there's always the question of whether his model is applicable or even ethical in all situations.
That's right. We have to be critical.
We can't just accept things blindly,
We have to think for ourselves.
weigh the pros and cons,
Considering the context.
and make our own judgments.
Exactly. It's important to remember that, right?
Yeah, we can't just follow any ideology blindly, no matter how appealing it might seem,
There are always trade-offs,
and potential dangers.
especially with something like revolution.
Right, things can get out of hand quickly. Which brings us back to that point about commitment, the self-sacrifice that Che Guevara talked about.
It's a powerful idea, but
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, for sure. On the one hand, that dedication, that willingness to give everything for a cause, it can be inspiring.
it can unite people.
It can drive incredible change,
Oh,
but it can also lead to extremism,
it's fanaticism.
to justifying terrible actions.
It's the name of the cause.
Exactly, and we have to be mindful of that as we admire Che's passion, his commitment,
We have to learn from history,
from both the successes and the failures.
so we don't repeat the mistakes.
And speaking of learning, I want to leave you with something to think about as you continue exploring this topic.
Okay, I'm listening.
We've been talking about guerrilla warfare in a very specific way.
Armed groups, fighting governments.
Right, but what if we broaden our perspective?
How do you mean?
What if we think about gorilla as a metaphor?
A metaphor?
Yeah, for any situation where there's a power imbalance.
Where the underdog is fighting the giant.
Exactly.
Okay, I see where you're going.
It's about strategy, adaptability, resilience.
Those principles can apply anywhere.
Think about social movements.
Protests.
Artists challenging the norms.
Even individuals pushing for change within their companies.
It's that guerrilla spirit.
That refusal to give up.
That creativity in the face of obstacles.
It's that belief that you can make a difference.
Even when the odds are stacked against you.
It's a powerful idea.
It is. So keep an eye out for those modern-day guerrillas. They're all around us.
Fighting their own battles.
In their own ways.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great note to end on, I think.
It is.
We've covered so much today.
We have.
The history, the theory, the ethics. It's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
But hopefully you've come away with more than just facts. With new perspectives, new questions.
More ideas.
And maybe even a little bit of that guerrilla spirit yourself. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Keep those minds sharp, and we'll see you next time.